Hello and welcome. If you've been following me on TikTok recently, you may have seen that I added Bluetooth to an iPod Nano 3rd Gen. Yeah, and there's only so much you can say in a 30-second clip, so I thought I'd do a bit of a longer video here, just walking through that whole process, and yeah, because, I don't know, I feel a lot of people would be interested in this. So, yeah, the board I used, it's called the KCX_BT_emitter V1.7, and I got it off of AliExpress for about $3. And what this board does is, well, it's just a Bluetooth transmitter circuit board pretty much. You just hook it up to a battery. Just takes like any standard lithium ion battery, like, yeah, whatever voltage that is, like up to 4.2 volts. I think this can be powered up to 5 volts. And then you just hook it up to the headphone jack with left audio, right audio on ground, and there you go. It's got a built-in antenna, but with these iPods, a lot of them are made out of metal, so that antenna can't pass through metal. So you'll have to either put in another antenna and route it under the plastic, or in this case I routed it behind the screen because it can pass through the screen but it can't pass through any of the other parts of the housing. Yeah, but if you put this in like a classic 5, you'd be able to just get away with using that antenna as is, because it can pass through the front plastic obviously. And on the classic 6th and 7th gens, if you were to put this in that, it could pass through the screen, but don't install that metal plate that goes behind the screen, and then it would work in that as well. And I've also put this in the Mini, and for that I had to reroute that antenna under that top plastic, which is a bit of extra work, but it still works pretty well, so nothing too bad there. Yeah, I also get a lot of comments of people wondering how do you pair the actual headphones without like a user interface. But the board just has a simple pair button. So you just open your earphones in pair mode, click the pair button on this, and then yeah, it connects and you're all good. But when you're installing this board in an iPod, you're going to have to figure out a way to mount that pair button in a way where it's accessible from the outside. So yeah, in the Mini that I did, I put that pair button like on that bottom plastic there. I'll put it like a picture up on the screen. So all you have to do is just push that bottom plastic. But on this one, I don't know, this one was a bit of a sketchier one. I just straight up drilled a hole in the back of the housing, which it doesn't look the nicest, but it gets the job done. This one's more functionality over looks, you know. But yeah, if you put these in a in like a 5th, 6th or 7th gen, you can just use the hold switch as a button as well. Like I'll put a video up that on the screen of that as well, but you can just mount like a little button, like super glue it right behind that hold switch, and then you just click in the button, and it'll be like a button and a switch at the same time, which is pretty cool. That's not my idea. I copied that from somebody else on YouTube, so yeah, I'll see if I can remember who it is. I'll credit them on the screen, but yeah, it was a pretty big tutorial. Anyways, what was I talking about? Yeah, so far I've done this mod in this Nano 3rd Gen, in the Mini, and in the classic 5th Gen. And it's worked in all three, but on this one, on the Nano 3rd Gen, and on the classic 5th Gen, when you switch off the power, the board still stays powered, like half powered, through the headphone jack somehow. Like even though the battery's fully been disconnected from the actual Bluetooth transmitter circuit board, somehow, I don't know how it's possible, but the board must be pulling power through the headphone jack somehow from the iPod, and it still manages to stay powered. It doesn't work properly when it's switched off though, but it just makes this terrible screeching noise, which if you switch it off while your headphones are connected, it will just like full blast this white noise screeching sound. So yeah, that's a bit of an issue, and I don't know if I'd be comfortable selling something like that, you know. But on the Minis, it works perfectly fine. When you switch it off, it just turns straight off. So the Minis is good. But yeah, so I'll have to see what's going on with that. I've seen a lot of people online, they've been doing this mod with another Bluetooth circuit board, and they hook it up straight to the logic board. I think it should be the same, because you're just attaching it in a different point. It's not like it's the same circuit, just in a different spot on the circuit, you know. So it'll probably behave the same if you did that, but I don't know, maybe I should give that a go as a troubleshooting sort of thing. Yeah, but other than that issue, it still works perfectly fine. So yeah, after you take apart that Nano 3rd Gen, just as I showed in the previous video in the tutorial, so if you haven't seen that Nano 3rd Gen Ultimate Repair Guide, just go check that out as well if you're interested in fixing one of these. I'll go into more depth about how to take this iPod apart in that. This isn't like a tutorial for the Nano 3rd Gen, this is just more of a walkthrough of the Bluetooth mod, I guess. But yeah, after you've got it open and taken out that logic board and taken out your battery, the first thing I did was remove the that metal plate in there, which will just give us a bunch of extra space to work with as well. Oh yeah, one other thing to note. Some of the 8 gig versions of this model will have 2 memory chips stacked on top of each other, and the Bluetooth circuit board won't fit in that version of this iPod. So you want to either use a 4 gigabyte version, or if you've got an 8 gig version that only uses 1 chip, you can use that as well. But just keep that in mind because, yeah, that position is where the Bluetooth circuit board will go, just on top of that memory chip there. So yeah, and there's basically just enough space for this board to fit in this iPod. It's pretty tight, so yeah. So after I got that logic board out, I just sanded down there's like this grey plastic thing that sticks up on top of the 30-pin connector. So I just sanded that down because I decided I was going to put a power switch on top of that just to switch off the Bluetooth circuit, you know, because otherwise it'll be running the whole time and then it'll just be draining your battery, and you know, no one wants that. Better to just turn it off when you're not using it. Oh yeah, that's another thing. You can still use the headphone jack as normal with this mod. It's not like it disables it or anything, so which is pretty good because yeah, I still want to keep the headphone jack, of course. I don't use Bluetooth earphones for me personally. I just did this more because it's cool and you can. I still like the wired earphones. They're a lot better. They're cheaper. You don't have to charge them. You don't have to carry around some bulky box wherever you go. You don't have a delay from the Bluetooth. The wire is a better technology in my personal opinion than Bluetooth, but you know, these days everybody likes their Bluetooth. So, but yeah, I just did this mod more because it's just cool and because you can, I guess. Oh yeah, so before I installed this in the actual iPod itself, I took my hot air rework station and I removed the connector for the antenna there because we're just using the built-in one in this case. But yeah, that'll give us a lot more clearance as well, because if I didn't take that off, then that would probably be pushing up against the metal housing. So yeah, just took that off. There are other components on it that stick up quite a bit. For instance, the pair button, but I cut a hole for that anyways because we need to use that. So yeah. Yeah, and so to wire this thing up, it's pretty straightforward to be honest. You just need a positive and negative wire to the battery, the left, right, and ground audios to the headphone jack, and then that's pretty much it, mate. Also, yeah, since I snapped off that the antenna and ran that behind the screen, I also put another 2 wires for that as well. But yeah, here I'm just installing a wire in each of the different connection points at the moment. And make sure you do these like properly color coded, so you do like a black for negative and a red for positive, and just so you don't mix everything up, you know, because you can't see what each wire is for when you've got this thing in the iPod itself. All those, like the writing's on the bottom of the board, so once you stick it down, you're not going to be able to see what wire does what. And then you might get into a situation where you wire your left into your right audio and your right into your left audio, and then it's all just muddled up. So yeah, always make sure you're using some color-coded wires and stuff. Oh yeah, and after I put the wires in, I just like to snip the bottoms off and shave it down flush, because when we need every millimeter we can get when doing a mod like this. You don't want to be wasting any space. So yeah, I just use a file and sand it down till it's flush. Then I get some alcohol and wipe away all the little flakes there, all the shavings. And then I get some tweezers and just go in between each of the connection points just to make sure nothing's actually touching or anything down there, because that'll cause all types of issues. Yeah, and you see here I snap off the antenna that's built in, and then I'll just wire up 2 extra wires so we can put the antenna behind the screen, because yeah, as I said earlier, the Bluetooth signal can't pass through the metal. The only part of this iPod it can pass through is the plastic on the screen. So yeah, and as I said, we want to install like a little power switch in this, because if you don't, then you won't be able to turn off the Bluetooth board and the battery will just drain in like a day or 2, which is not ideal. So yeah, so I got this little power switch which I took from a broken iPod Nano 1st gen logic board. I just chopped it off with some scissors, and as you can see I'm just super gluing it down onto the top of the 30 pin there, which I think was the best position to put it. I mean, you could, if you wanted to give up your lock switch, you could use that, but you know, since the lock switch on this is soldered to the board, in order to do that mod, you'd have to unsolder it, like probably flip it upside down, and then wire it up that way, because you know it's soldered to the board. You can't just hook it up like you could on a classic 5th gen or whatever. After you got that all glued down there, you can just go ahead and I put some Captain tape down, some double-sided adhesive, and stick that whole board assembly with all the wires hanging off it straight down. And yes, now to wire up the headphone jack. So you want to get your wires like as short as possible here, because yeah, there's not much space to work with, and when you're doing projects like this, the wires can actually take up quite a bit of space. So I tried to make each run like as short as possible, which doesn't give you much room for error, but yeah. Oh yeah, and I'll put the pin out for the headphone jack up on the screen as well. I figured that out myself by using a multimeter and an image of a headphone jack pin out on Google, and yeah, I just figured it out. So there you go. But yeah, as you can see, those runs are pretty short. If you accidentally made them too short, then you'd have to do the whole thing again, which would be pretty annoying. But you don't really have much of a choice here, because otherwise you won't be able to get the rear housing back on. So yes. Yeah, and I guess, I don't know, if you were willing to give up some battery life, you could go with a smaller battery and put this behind the screen or something like that as well. But I wanted to keep the original battery in here. Well, it's not the original, it's a brand new battery, but it's still like as big as the original, you know, because the Bluetooth is going to drain some extra power as well. I don't know how much extra it's going to consume, but yeah, you want as much battery as you can when you're doing a Bluetooth mod, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So yeah, didn't want to go too small with that. But yeah, the mod would obviously be a lot easier, and you'd have a lot more space to work with if you just installed this where the battery goes and just went with a smaller battery. But yeah, I don't know, I'd rather just put it down there at the bottom, you know what I'm saying? So yeah, and it's a pretty tedious process, you know, just wiring up all this stuff. I mean, it doesn't look like it because I probably skip a bunch of stuff in the video, but it's quite annoying. Or not annoying, I know, I find it fun, to be honest, but still, it'll take a while. This will be like a project like this will probably be your whole day, or at least an afternoon. Depends how much stuff you've done like this in the past, I guess, how much experience you have. But yeah, before we wire the battery up, we want to go off of the little power switch that I put in. Yeah, so I went from the negative wire to the power switch, out of the power switch with another negative wire, which will go to the battery, and that'll give us the ability to turn off the Bluetooth module, I thought, in theory. But when we actually went to turn it off, that didn't work properly, so that kind of sucked. But still, the thought was there. Yeah, and when hooking it up to the battery, so when you're hooking up the power leads to the battery, you always want to hook it up to the BMS, alright? Because what the BMS does is it will stop the battery from working if the voltage falls below 3 volts, which is a good thing, because if the voltage goes below 3 volts, it's kind of dangerous, you know, you can risk a battery exploding. So if you were to hook this up straight to the cell, like on those two metal things that go to the BMS, pretty much the Bluetooth board is just going to drain that battery straight away, and that's not going to be good, obviously. Then you'll have to get a new battery. So yeah, you don't want to do that. You want to try and avoid that and just hook them up to the black and red, the positive and negative wires on that BMS there. So then you'll still get that protection, and the battery won't drop below 3 volts and won't explode. So yes, yeah, and what that board does, if the battery does drop below 3 volts, it'll just like be dead. It won't be able to charge up or anything. So that board is pretty important for the iPod. So I thought I'd just mention that, because if I didn't mention that and someone watched this video and they tried it, they'd probably end up killing their battery or causing an explosion or something like that. It's not like if you do it every time it's going to explode. I don't know, it's probably in a rare circumstance, but still, that's what that board is there for. It's a protection circuit. You know, I think it probably has some temperature sensor in there as well, potentially, to stop it charging if it's too hot. I don't know, that's a guess. It mightn't have that at all, but it should. Some of them do. Yeah, and anyways, it's starting to look a bit messy at this stage in the mod. You just got wires hanging everywhere. But after we wired that up, just folded it back with some Captain tape and just made it look how it did before. Yeah, now just hooking this thing up to the logic board. So I just wired that in like normal. Yeah, and then after that little piece of the antenna that I had ripped off earlier, I just wired that back up as well. And now just to reinstall this whole assembly back into the iPod, which is kind of a fiddly process just because of how many wires are hanging off it at this stage, but oh well. Yeah, and again, it'll be easier if you made the runs short rather than long. If all the wires are really long, then this will be even more difficult and confusing, I guess. So yeah, you want to make your leads appropriate lengths. Yeah, just screwing it all back in, and yeah, then I switched it on, gave it a test, found that it was all working right, and this is the stage in the mod where I found out that the power switch wasn't working 100% as intended, but oh well, still worked good enough, I guess. Yeah, now and obviously that back isn't going to go back on straight away because we've got the little power switch in there and the power button as well, which will both be in the way. So I had to cut some holes in the back housing just to get that to fit properly. Oh yeah, I also had to cut a hole in the front plate just so the power switch could fit properly as well. But yeah, I cut all those just using a rotary tool. Or a Dremel. Dremel's like the brand. I just got a cheap rotary tool off of eBay for like 20 bucks, but it's basically the same thing. It just simply cuts. It's just like a crappy hand drill, I guess. Gets the job done. It's a useful tool to have. I'd recommend getting one just for random stuff you do like this. I use it probably once a month just to, I don't know, cut a hole. It's not a very accurate tool, but it doesn't have to be when you're just doing some wacky experiment like this. And yeah, so I just cut a hole for the power button and for the pair button as well. And then I put it back on and reassembled it. Just the same as I did on the in the Nano 3rd Gen tutorial, which is a bit of a process. So if you want to know how to get one of these things back together properly, I recommend just go watching that video, to be honest. So yeah, overall, I mean, it worked on the Nano 3rd Gen, but since you can't really switch it off on this model, I don't know, I probably wouldn't do it again. I wouldn't sell one of these and I wouldn't offer it as a service. It looks pretty ugly, so oh well. It was a fun project to do on a Saturday afternoon or whenever I did it. The TikTok looked pretty cool too, so yeah, just go follow me on TikTok. I reckon my TikTok's way better than my YouTube videos, in my personal opinion. It's just a lot easier to make a good 30-second video compared to a good 30-minute video. So yeah, just go check that out. But yeah, I wouldn't do this on the Nano 3rd Gen. I'd do it on the Mini. It worked way better on the Mini. So if you want a Bluetooth iPod and you want to use this board, I'd grab an iPod Mini. I got to try it on the classic 3rd and 4th gens as well. That'll be what's up next for this board. But yeah, so overall, would I recommend that you do this in your Nano 3rd Gen? No, just do it on the Mini instead. It's best on the Mini. It just looks the best, it works the best. The Mini is the iPod for the Bluetooth mod, I reckon. So I'm going to offer this as like a mail-in service as well for the iPod Mini only. So if you want to send your iPod to me and get it modded into a Bluetooth iPod, that service will be available on my website. I already have a mail-in repair service, but I'll just add the Bluetooth iPod Mini mod onto that list as well. So yeah, if you're interested in that. If you want a Bluetooth iPod and you don't have the ability to do it yourself, or you just don't want to do it yourself, you can always get me to do it for you. Yeah, so just go over to my website, partspluspods.com.au, book a mail-in repair for that, and yeah. And I'll probably also have some Bluetooth Minis available for sale there as well. I have one there available at the moment. Or if you want any iPods, yeah, I've got them all for sale on my website. Heaps of touches, nanos, all the difficult ones that nobody else wants to fix. Got all those ones for sale. Also got the classics and all that good stuff too, and the mail-in repair service. If you sat through this, thanks man, I appreciate it. Give it a like, give it a subscribe, check out my TikTok because that's way better than this, and see you next time. Bye.